For decades, America has tried to combat the harms of drug use primarily through banning drugs and incarcerating people who use them. But this has caused a violent underground market for drugs, increasing crime in our communities. It's caused contaminated substances, increasing overdose deaths, and it's caused incarceration to skyrocket, destabilizing families. What we're doing isn't working. Crime, death, and broken families are the collateral damage of using the criminal justice system to address the public health issue of drugs. If you're looking for a better path forward, you're in the right place. What if we changed our drug policies to prioritize life, health, harm reduction, and thriving? And what if it benefited all of us? Our criminal justice approach to drugs had a beginning, and it can have an end. Join us on the journey to end it for good. I'm Christina Dent, your host, and if you're new here, End It For Good is a nonprofit started in 2019, based in Mississippi, that invites people to support approaches to drugs that prioritize life and the opportunity to thrive. This podcast is one of the ways we do that. You can head over to episode 34 to hear my story as a conservative Christian foster mom, changing my own mind on the best path forward with drugs, and then come on back and dive in deeper. I didn't change my mind overnight, and most other people don't either. We all need time to learn, think, ask questions, and explore. Whatever your perspective is, I'm glad you're here. Let's journey together. Welcome back to the End It For Good podcast. I'm Christina Dent, your host. Super excited to be joined by my friend Kathleen Cochran today. She is the founder of Mothers for All Paths to Recovery, which is a community dedicated to helping families navigate substance use with compassion, evidence, and hope. She also serves as the president of Veloma Foundation, advocating for families affected by overdose loss, and she's trained in the Invitation to Change approach through the Center for Motivation and Change. So she's been on this journey for a long time. She's going to share some of that with us today. If you are on Facebook and you are a mom of a child who has or is struggling with substance use disorder, I encourage you to go check out the Mothers for All Paths to Recovery Facebook community. It's a really encouraging place and a place with lots of people also on a learning journey to try to understand how to respond in more helpful ways. So love Kathleen's work, and we're just going to dive right in. So Kathleen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. We were talking earlier that I had you in my group when you just published your book, Curious, which is on our list of recommended reads. So I just want to take a moment to thank you for the work that you're doing. It's bold, it's brave, and it's so necessary. So thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate that. I know we both feel the meaningful nature of this work, and you, I know, feel that very personally. So tell us a little about your story. Your bio has more of kind of your professional things that you're involved in this space, but you got into this because it is personal to you. How did you get involved in this area of family support and recovery, and how to better approach that?
Well, I never planned to get involved with this. My career, 50 years in the hospitality business, leading hotels across the country. But everything changed when addiction entered our family. And, you know, like so many parents, I believe that if I loved enough, searched hard enough, or found the right treatment, I could somehow fix it. Instead, we spent years navigating treatment, relapse, fear, hope, uncertainty. 20 years. My daughter was originally introduced to opioids through Oxycontin, prescribed to her from a dentist. And she was only 13 years old, and I refilled that prescription twice. I had no idea at the time the addictive nature of that particular medication, and I was just interested, as I still am, in addressing her pain. I'm a mom. So that set us off on a pretty windy road through, I first put her into a therapeutic boarding school. I am, my daughter and I are both victims of the troubled teen industry. Had to take out a loan, had to ask my parents for a loan for $150,000 to put her in what I thought was revolutionary. I was going to be one and done. And she was there for a year. I had no idea, being brainwashed. That facility has since closed down. People died there. It was Synanon based. And that just actually catapulted my daughter's journey into heroin. And so I survived the heroin epidemic, which is now the fentanyl. And of course, we're just seeing all kinds of other synthetics introduced into the market. But I did the only thing I knew how to do, which was just keep putting her in rehab. And it's almost embarrassing to say, but I know I'm not alone. But I sent her to 20 rehabs. It was a series of wash, rinse, and repeat. And it took me a long time through that experience to actually start looking at evidence-based treatment.
What was that turning point like for you? I would imagine if you were walking with her through these last couple of decades, there was even less knowledge out there about evidence-based ways for families to approach addiction, much more kind of like you were talking about that first boarding school that you sent her to. Is very kind of punishment, shame centric. This is what's going to create change. Were those the messages that you took? And what was the beginning of a shift in your own understanding of maybe there's a different way to approach this?
Google. I I kept hearing the same thing for my daughter. She was an excellent rehabber, quote unquote. She did really well. And all of those rehabs were, 30 days. Things have changed now, but that was really what insurance would pay for. And, that's a whole nother conversation about how rehabs sort of scam you in. And I mean, my husband and I literally spent half of our retirement savings on trying to save her. Not that I wouldn't, do it again, but I know a lot more. Um, I the only thing that was available were support groups. So if you, went onto Facebook, which was the predominant social media at that time, and typed in addiction, you got lots of Facebook groups. And what I heard was, that I needed to detach with love. People called me an enabler. The advice was, and this is also the advice I received from rehabs because I attended all of the family support groups, and the psychologists and psychiatrists and people leading those parent groups were all saying the same thing. They have to hit rock bottom, and calling me names and just telling me, really, Christina, to do exactly the opposite of what a mother's heart would do to try to save or help their child. And it just never hit me right. My daughter was not refusing help because she lacked consequences. I mean, she was living with a chronic health condition complicated by trauma, by shame, a mental health challenge, and a treatment system that often wasn't designed for somebody with such a complex history. And eventually I realized the advice wasn't matching what I was seeing, and families were being given false choices instead of practical tools. So I just started to Google. And, at the time, my daughter was, I would put her in the category of severe addiction. I do believe that there is, mild, moderate, and severe. She was an IV at this time now, an IV heroin user. And I just started to get on Google and I came across medications for opioid use disorder. And I started asking, I started talking in my support groups, hey, I just heard about buprenorphine and methadone, and oh my gosh, I mean, the backlash was incredible and influencing to me. You're just going to trade one addiction for another addiction. And at that time, I didn't really understand the difference between addiction and dependency. And there is a big difference. And I immediately sort of heeded their advice, and kind of shut down a little bit. And at this time, I had decided that I was going to move my family to a small town in the middle of nowhere, Montana. And my daughter, I moved with my husband and my daughter. My two sons were off in school and getting their careers started. And I thought, well, I'll just move us to a mountain and that'll do it. It's like right? It's like the island. Let's just
Yeah.
put them on a desert island. And so I moved us up to Montana. I did have a job, but it was, it was really honestly in the middle of nowhere. And within, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks, my daughter found like the biggest dealer in the closest town, which was an hour away, that delivered. And I just was like, you know, I can't stop her. I am powerless. This is what she wants to do. I started realizing that this is what she had been telling me for years. She would go to rehab and then she would relapse and she would say, Mom, I just don't want to stop. And I just didn't listen to her. I thought that I didn't think she had any autonomy, that she was under the influence of toxic drugs, and how could she possibly have any thoughts of her own? And I don't believe that anymore. I do know there's exceptions, right, where people go into psychosis and stuff, but my daughter wasn't that way, and she was speaking the truth to me. So I still, because of, I think, bias and listening to really uneducated people, just, I think other moms who were probably really trying to help me, but just also didn't know. It was like the blind leading the blind, right? I still had this really negative perception about methadone, which is the gold standard in, particularly severe opioid use disorder. So I asked her if she wanted to try Suboxone. So we ended up getting her into a clinic, and that was really our first foray into medications for opioid use disorder.
Now, explain the difference between dependence and addiction. We talk about that also, but I think that's a really crucial component for families to begin to consider medications, because it is still so common to hear people say you're just trading one addiction for another. So, how would you explain that to people? What's the difference between addiction and dependency?
Well, addiction is using a substance and not being able to stop using that substance in spite of the negative consequences. So that is the definition of addiction. Dependence is, that you need a medication and you need to take it as prescribed, right, to function properly. And if you stop taking that medication, some of those medications may cause some withdrawals, which can also be managed under a doctor's care. So, there's many medications. If you think about diabetes, there's many medications that we are dependent upon to function better. Antidepressants, I don't know if anyone's ever tried to get off of an antidepressant. I did, and that was no easy task. Talk about brain zaps and withdrawals. But at the time, I needed that medication to help me function, and I'm very grateful that that medication was available to me. It's the same with both buprenorphine and methadone.
Yeah, that's a really helpful distinction, because just because your body is dependent on something doesn't mean that you're addicted to it. There's a difference between physical dependence and that your body's going to experience some kind of withdrawal if you stop taking something, and an addiction where you are taking something that is proactively harming you. Your life is worse because of it, and you're continuing to take it.
Yeah,
that's addiction. That's a totally different thing.
Right. And when you think about someone like my daughter as an example, who was a very heavy user, so, her dopamine, like let's say, the average person's dopamine when they get really excited is here. Well, she was using so much heroin that it was way up here, right? Just way up here and pounding her brain so that the only way to feel happy or normal was not normal, right? There, in her own brain, our natural chemicals was only going to go up to here. So she really needed that opioid to function and to stabilize. And, people would say, she's, trading one addiction for another. And I'm like, all right. Before she used buprenorphine, and she eventually went to methadone, but before she used either one of those medications, her life was out of control. She lied, she stole, she did horrible things that are against her moral standards. She was completely out of control. And when she was taking buprenorphine and then eventually methadone, none of those things happened. Zero, because of the way the medication is released over time in your brain. She actually was able to stabilize her life and did absolutely none of those things. So if that's trading one addiction for another, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I think it's such a different way of thinking about kind of the goal. I think the messaging that our culture has told us for decades and decades and decades is that abstinence of any mind-altering substance is the goal. And in repeating that for so long in so many different ways, we've forgotten that really the goal of the abstinence was that somebody would be able to live a healthy life. And there was a time where it was believed you could not do that unless you were completely abstinent. Well, that thinking started at a time where we did not have medications for addiction treatment. They had not been invented yet. And now we do. And we know now that there are ways to stabilize a life and to live in a healthy way, even if you're not completely abstinent. And I think that's part of the rub, is that we've lost sight of the goal. The goal is for someone to be able to live a healthy, thriving life where they are doing well, able to show up for the things that they value, able to be part of family functions, able to, parent if they have children. Those are kind of the markers that we should be thinking about when we're thinking about success, not just this one marker of, are they taking any kind of medication? Are they completely abstinent or not? And I think that's kind of the sad reality of what has happened, is that we've lost sight of the goal, and we focused on the path that somebody's taking. And if the path isn't the thing we think it should be, we're not even looking at the goal to say, hey, you know what? Kathleen's daughter on medication is actually stable and able to live a healthy and functional life. What a gift that you're not, and she is not living in that chaos of active addiction. But we really have, in so many ways, stripped families of that ability to see that space as being a good thing because of the judgment that they receive for enabling a child's addiction or a loved one's addiction. When the research just profoundly contradicts that.
Yeah, methadone's been around for over 50 years. So it is a highly, researched medication. You get the whole, it's gonna destroy your bones. I'm like, wait a minute. My daughter is putting a needle in her arm with who knows what's in it anymore, right? So I would rather have a medication that I know what's in it, that's been stabilized, that's been studied, for a long time and is considered the gold standard. I mean, Christina, because you read statistics. It's just a fact that people on medications for opioid use disorder have over a 60% chance of not overdosing and dying. Like, that's just a fact. And I just don't understand, why this is not in the, the handout and first defense. In fact, the 20 rehabs that my daughter went to, not one of them, they called her a chronic relapser. That's what she was labeled as. Not one of those, and they had, medical professionals, addiction psychiatrists, psychologists. Not one of them said, have you thought about trying medications for opioid use disorder? Have you thought about that? Not one. I found all of that all on my own.
So let's talk about this shift for you from shifting the way that you yourself thought about the options available to your daughter and what you would support for her into how you have begun helping other people. What your Facebook group is Moms for All Paths to Recovery. So you say in the name what you are intending for this group to be. Why is it that you feel like that is kind of a core central message that you want to convey?
Well, I do get a little bit of grief from the dads in my group. They're like, what about us dads? So I do have fathers in the group, and I don't know. I don't know why there's not more fathers involved. I think, knowing my husband, I unfortunately lost my husband 2 years ago, but it took us a while to get on the same page. We actually went through some ITC training together.
Invitation to change. Yeah.
And that was really a game changer for the two. Like, he just kind of had a bunch of aha moments, and we were able to get on the same page, which is, I think, just really critical when there's two people that are parenting, or even, siblings that want to support their loved one, is to be on the same page and not to argue about it. It is no easy feat. And I have a passion for mothers. Somebody wrote this. She was a harm reduction focused person. And the quote is something like, every mother that has a child that uses drugs is just a harm reductionist waiting for someone to teach her. And I realize that is right. Our children are ill, and they have a health condition, and we're running around waving this flag, trying to get someone to pay attention to us, only to be called enablers and, recommended to go to a codependence no more, 12-step group. I don't know how you could be codependent on a child that is sick as a mother. So I just noticed that there was lots of mothers that were in these support groups that if they just had a little education. I didn't want to start a support group. There's a few really good ones out there now that we're happy to refer, but I wanted to give people information like I've given my own child, because I think we have tried just about everything. I think I am experienced in just about every form of treatment in my own little living classroom. And I think while we cannot stop our children from using drugs, it's just something that you need to know, and that you need to know it's not your fault. There's nothing you did wrong. But we can educate ourselves. We can advocate, right, for people that are suffering right this minute. And we can give our children tools. So I would say to my daughter, "Hey, I just read about this, and I'd send her an article. Is this something you might be interested in doing?" There's different shoes. We just keep trying on those shoes until one of them fits. And because I've been in this space, Christina, for over 20 years, I've been through the lows, I've been through the highs, I've been through go harm reduction, I've been through now let's tear harm reduction down. It's almost like economics, right? It just goes up and down and up and down. I think I'm experienced enough to really understand that addiction is a personal experience. And every human being, our biology is so different. Whatever reason we picked up the drug to begin with is so different, and we need an individualized experience. I personally don't really like AA. I went to Al-Anon. That just didn't resonate with me, but my daughter loves AA. And I know moms that have, it saved their life. So I've just been around long enough to just, who would I be to trash somebody else's path? Whether that's through, religious rehabs. I have, some issues personally myself because they don't allow a lot of medications, including antidepressants and things like that. But I also know people that have recovered and are thriving and are living so I've just learned, hey, don't make any judgments, Kathleen. I mean, you can have your own opinion, be clear that this is your opinion, but I feel like my job is just to put it all out there.
Yeah. I really love that because I think for us, as we've talked a lot about multiple pathways to recovery and exploring novel treatment methods and neuroelectric therapy and psychedelic assisted therapy, it is not to say that those are now the new only way you should go,
Right.
and you should ditch anything else. It's to say, look, we need every tool available, and those tools should be offered to people as sort of, hey, here is the array of options that might work for you. And one of those might trigger some interest in their child or their loved one. They might say, I might be willing to try that. And even if it's not the thing we would pick for them, hey, if they're invested in it, it is far more likely to be effective and useful in their life. And I loved what you said earlier about so I think there's a lot of families who maybe they wish that they could make that move to the small town in Montana because they're still living in that dream that that would solve the problem. Like if we could just get out of here, if we could just go somewhere new, if they could just start over. And that dream of we can force this to stop, we can control what our child or our spouse or our brother or sister or whatever does. That reality as you lived is that you can't control that. And families are experiencing that every day. But so much of the messaging we're still teaching families is that that they can control it. If you just do the right thing, then
Right.
this is going to happen. Just send them to this rehab. They're amazing. Just do this. Just don't let them do that. And the reality is you can't control another person. You can't control their choices. They will find the drug no matter what tiny island or small mountain town you take them to. If that's what they want to do, they are going to find that. And I don't want that to sound like I'm taking that not seriously. It is, but it is the sadness to me is like it's that we have to. I think we are doing a disservice to families to try to communicate that that is not true. That's true. We know that's true in the rest of life. We know we can't control our families and all the other crazy things people in our families do. But the industry of treatment is so lucrative that we still are living with a lot of messaging that in this area, yes, you can control them. You can make their decisions for them if you just send them to the right place. And that your experience is so typical of families spending just tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on treatment that their family member may have zero interest in completing. I was just talking with a dad about 2 weeks ago, and they sent their son to, after years and years of addiction, sent him to some sort of treatment center. I don't know exactly what type of treatment they were offering, but the center told him up front, look, you've got to have $20,000 in cash when you come in the door. And when they got there to drop their son off, the center said, look, if he leaves like tomorrow, he can do that. And you don't get your money back. We just want to be sure you understand this. And they said, yeah, we just feel like this is their only hope. And so they did. And sure enough, their son left a couple of days later, another $20,000 down the drain.
Out the door.
Out the door. And
yeah.
I cannot imagine the amount of stress that families live under with continually trying incredibly expensive interventions that they don't have control over, whether their loved one even stays there the whole time to experience what might have been. But I think that's the sooner that families can kind of begin to that hard journey of embracing that lack of control, I think is part of, in my experience in talking to families, is part of what opens them up to this mindset of what are all the tools I can provide instead of what's the one path I'm going to force. And that kind of expansive thinking tends to come with realizing I can't force this. I can't control this. What I can do is educate myself with as many options as possible and try to just continue offering those when a moment of opportunity comes to talk with my loved one. Maybe they're open.
When you were talking about the dad that you were talking to, I mean, it's so ludicrous to me that sometimes the kids get kicked out for like ridiculous things like smoking a cigarette or something. And I just don't know of any other situation where you're kicked out for the very reason why you're there. I mean, like, let's say you have even a slip or somebody throws a, tennis ball. Like, my daughter was in a rehab once and her dealer threw a tennis ball with a slit in it with drugs. I mean, I'm not making this stuff up. And we've all experienced it. Those of us that have been in the game, we've experienced all the things. And that's what really got me into harm reduction. is that, and so many people confuse harm reduction with abstinence when actually abstinence is a part of harm reduction. Obviously, if you're not using any kind of drug, then, right? Then that is a form of harm reduction. But I realized that I couldn't stop my daughter from using drugs, but I could try to make sure that she used them safely. And that's always such a weird conversation to have with another parent, because I talk to parents too. They're like, what? It's not okay that my kid uses drugs. I'm like, no, it's not. And I had to have those conversations with my daughter. Like, I don't want you to use a drug that hasn't been prescribed to you. And today's drugs, it's even worse. Like, I know this sounds weird, Christina, but it's like, I want to say I wish there was heroin again. I mean, I know that that's just crazy, crazy, crazy thinking, but because, what's going on now is so toxic. And even like this pressed pills and these young people are dying. I mean, I'm an advocate for early education. It just breaks my heart, right? It's just everywhere. You can't trust anything you take that you have not been prescribed personally, right?
Yep.
And it's a weird conversation to have with your child. Look, I don't want you to use drugs because you could die, not to mention all the other health complications that go along with using a toxic drug over and over again. So I'll just say that. But I also want you to be careful. And so I'm going to teach you. I taught my daughter everything I knew about harm reduction, which I learned from people that use drugs. And I have lots of people in my group that are, with a lived or living experience in drugs. And I've actually learned more from them than from any article I've ever read. And it's a shame that we don't invite those people to the table more often, particularly as it comes to drug policy. But, I educated my daughter. At one point, when I didn't have my other kids in the home, I created a space for her to use drugs in my garage, with the only ask that she would let me know so that I could be aware and I could check on her if I hadn't seen her in a while, right? She carried Narcan everywhere with her, and she personally has reversed several overdoses. Like, because she had it in her backpack because her mommy stuffed it in there. So I know it seems so odd to say that, but that's why I'm a proponent of it, because, there's no one taking care of people in active drug use. There's just no one doing it, except for harm reductionists on the street. There's some street doctors, which is great to see, that are out being compassionate. But that doesn't mean that you accept drug use, right? It just means that, you're just compassionate enough to try to take care of someone while they're active in drug use.
And that's got to be really hard. And I'm imagining there's people who are going, oh, that's a bridge too far. And I also imagine there's people who have lost a child listening who would now say, I think I would do anything to have them back again. And that's part of the challenge that's before us, is that most family members cannot conceive of their child actually dying. That really is not, I mean, it's too painful to really think about realistically. And so there are options for us that a lot of people only begin to consider once it is too late to consider those options. Now, I don't want you to think End It for Good is advocating for you to, the listener, to set up a drug using location in your garage. We're giving Kathleen an opportunity to share her experience. And I think that's really, it points to that, what do family members think are potential outcomes? If they think the outcome is abstinence or addiction, well, that's going to change the types of things that they are willing to engage in. If they think the outcome might be active chaotic addiction or stable dependence on a medication, they might start to think that sounds pretty good. Compared to the kind of lying, cheating, stealing that so many people experience in active addiction, where people are engaging in behavior that is against their own value system. That's part of the experience of addiction. It's not that your child suddenly doesn't care about you anymore. They are behaving against their own value system. It's just how addiction often presents itself in people. And so I think that's part of what we hope to do, is help people consider options earlier on, before they have lost the loved one, to say, well, there are other options. It doesn't have to be abstinence or I can't engage. It is, how can I still help them stay alive? How can I help them make some positive, healthy change? That would be a really great thing to see in their life, and to feel like that is an okay thing to do, rather than that's a failure of me as a parent. That's me like giving in, rather than me saying, you know what? I care about my child's health. I care that they don't die, and I'm going to try to do everything I can. How can I get fentanyl testing strips? How can I help them understand the risks of how to avoid HIV and Hep C? Those are very real, lifelong health implications for a person that you love and would give anything for.
And I want to be clear that I would, never judge another mother for any decision that they made, because it really is so personal. I mean, I sometimes share my story, and members will be like, well, but I've got 3 kids in the house, or I just can't, my heart, my head just can't allow drug use in my home. I'm like, okay. I mean, right? I completely, totally get that. I realize that I am on the other side, and I think because I've just been at it for so long, and I've really educated myself, that I have gotten into radical acceptance. And that's a hard place for anyone to get to. So I don't, I'm sharing my story with you, and that may not be what you think is good, and that's completely understandable. It's like where we come from, right? Where our value system is, and trying to help our children find their way back to that. What all of this has taught me the most, Christina, is to see my child as my child, and to love her unconditionally. And there's very few relationships, well, I don't think there's any. A parent-child relationship is really the only unconditional relationship. And so connection and love and compassion is where my heart lives. And understanding, do I like any of it? No. Have I been that crazy mother? I mean, look, I got skills like a DEA FBI agent, I mean, I've tracked my child. My husband is driven. We've done it all. But at the end of the day, I just follow my heart. And that's what I think I'm trying to help other parents realize, because your heart knows the way, right? Your heart knows that, throwing your kid out on the street may not be the best thing for them, depending on their personality and, I mean, have they ever been on the street before? Do they have any street sense? Are they going to get eaten up? Well, I would, say, I would rather have my kid live in a garage, right, with a little opening to come and go. I once pitched a tent in my backyard for my daughter to stay in rather than put her on the streets. When kids go to the streets, oftentimes, Christina, it gets worse, doesn't get better. So, but sometimes we have no choice, right? Sometimes parents have no choice. So I don't want you to think that I or my group uh, ever judges anybody for any of the personal decisions they make about their life based on their values.
I love your creativity and thinking of all the different ways that you could potentially provide some sort of shelter. I think that's such a beautiful, like, again, that kind of expansive thinking of what are all of the options available. I can't do X, Y, or Z, but maybe I could do something else. And even if I've everybody else thinks that might sound a little crazy. Maybe that's the thing that I think for me and my loved one could potentially work for a little while longer. Um, and we try
Right,
it. And
right.
I think I just love that kind of problem solving way of thinking instead of like very black and white thinking. Like it's either one way or it's no way. But rather, how can we find any place where we can find something where we can both are both willing to kind of work on together. And maybe that's a tent
Yeah.
in the backyard.
Yeah, and that's there's a relative that has a trailer, you know, just anything to try to offer some shelter. I mean, we've got data and information that shows that people have a better chance of recovery when they're housed. Unfortunately, my daughter, was on the streets for a year, and that was heartbreaking, but we had a child involved. And the worst possible situation, and I know there's probably many of your listeners that have had to make that, is to choose between your own child and your grandchild, right? But on the weekends that I didn't have my grandson, I went to her and I rented the cheapest motel I could find and I dragged her in off the streets and I made sure she got a shower and I tried to get some food in her. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and she'd be gone. But I tried to be very consistent about touching base with her. She never turned off her location. She did one time, and I told her I was going to shut her phone down, and she didn't believe me, so I did. And then she never did that again. So she was good. I was able to just to say, I just need to know that you're alive. I am. You have put yourself in a situation where death is a consequence of what your choices are. And I also know, and as the president of Valoma Foundation, the founder lost her son, her 24-year-old son, to a fentanyl overdose. And so I know that that's, well, it's a primal injustice, is what that is. And there's absolutely no words for losing your child to what I think is a preventable issue. But I also know that she had no regrets about her son not knowing how much his family loved him. And so I know that doesn't make it better, but I also know parents that unfortunately took all that advice, kicked their kids out, disconnected, and that is a regret of theirs. And so at the end of the day, if you have a child using drugs, it's Russian roulette. and it is a life-threatening disorder. I want to make sure my daughter knows how much she was loved. I do want to tell you that she is doing really good right now, though. Really good. And so I feel she was stable thanks to methadone for about 8 years. And when my husband died, she went off the rails. And so I never thought I was going to have to fight this again, but it also just shows the cunning and baffling issues with this disorder. And she was a daddy's girl, big time, and she just slipped. She was on Suboxone at the time. She had gotten off of methadone, sort of tapering down the whole methadone thing. That's another conversation, but it's just not a good setup. The clinic, it's just very dysfunctional and carceral, and it was an hour away each from our house. And so we moved her to Suboxone, and that just wasn't strong enough to keep her. She blew right through her Suboxone, even at the highest dose, with fentanyl, which makes sense. So I think if anyone listening has a child that has severe fentanyl addiction, that they should consider methadone versus Suboxone, at least initially, to stabilize their child. So, but she's about to celebrate 1 year in continuous recovery. And she did it once, and so I am just cheering her on that she can do it again.
It's beautiful. I love it. What are some of your favorite concrete resources for families? If they're listening, they're like, okay, how can I learn more?
I would say that the Center for Motivation and Change and all of their training on craft, which then sort of morphed into the Invitation for Change, is really a game changer for a lot of parents, particularly that are new to this. And that's why I have my group, is to try to shorten everyone's experience by 10 years. My group is all educational. We have, files of resources. If you have a child who's in, active addiction, there is an organization called Harm Reduction Works that has all kinds of support meetings for people that are in active use all the way to abstinence. So you're at least engaging your child in some kind of group activity. I'm an avid reader. I recommend, there's a gal, Christina Dent. She wrote this really good book on Curious. Yeah, so I'm an avid reader, and there's just all kinds of fantastic books available, which we also feature in a list on my site.
Fantastic. As we wrap up, if a parent is listening today and they just feel exhausted and scared, unsure what to do next, what would you most want them to know?
That they're not alone, and that there are communities that would welcome them. Sometimes we feel so isolated and embarrassed to talk about that our children or child is struggling with drugs. And I'm pretty open about it, as as I have been here this morning. And you'd be amazed how many people, I think 1 in 5 people in the United States have experience with someone that uses drugs in their family, a friend. So it's getting out of the darkness and finding support that works for you. And then I think being willing to check your own biases and your own judgments. I've had probably the last 10 years this incredible unlearning process about some of my own, judgment biases. So, be open. Don't just completely shut something down. Make sure that you research it and really understand, the science, if it's evidence-based research or articles. Just go in with an open mind and never stop loving your child. Never stop telling them that you love them. I texted my daughter often in addition to seeing her whenever I could, even though it was on the streets and my heart broke and I had to watch her use drugs. I wouldn't trade that for anything. There was tender moments where I could hold her and sit with her in her darkness. And she remembers all that. She remembers and she knows. And God forbid, but if she died tomorrow, I would never have any regrets for anything I've ever done.
That's beautiful. If you are interested in connecting with Kathleen and that group of moms and dads on Facebook, we'll link Moms for All Paths to Recovery. It really is a great group. I don't comment in there, but I do love to see what people post. And have just really loved the openness for people. People come in and they post all kinds of stuff about how they're at the end of their rope. They're so angry they can't even see straight, and why doesn't their loved one get their act together? And just to see the compassion from other people in the group to say, hey, I know what that's like. That's so hard. Here's a resource that's been helpful on my journey, or give me a call if you ever want to talk, or particularly touching has been seeing people who are in recovery and can relate to the experience of maybe their child to talk so compassionately about, that's what a beautiful thing that you care about your child that much, kind of reframing all of that anger and that, look, this is because you care and because it is so painful. And yeah, when I was still using, or for some people, I am still using, and this is kind of the thing that has helped to bring at least a degree of health to the family relationships that I have. That's just a really beautiful thing. And I've loved seeing that part of that community when social media can be so divisive and angry and everybody, rage posting or whatever, to see so many people using the experiences that they've had, whatever they are, to be an encouragement to other families that feel like they're at the end of their rope, and helping to kind of share information in a gentle way, generally, so that people can engage wherever they're at and whatever kind of learning point they're willing to start at.
And Christina, to feel free to ask questions or not to agree, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say that we don't have some, advocates in the group that might jump on a post right away, but I am very active in my group, and I think I do a pretty good job of making sure that people don't run people out of my group. It's like, okay, if they have a different opinion, it's completely 100% okay, right? And so I think that is what makes I think I've trained our group into just being open and, don't come in and, blow up someone's post. If you have an experience about what worked for you, I'd like to hear it. But that's really all you can talk about, right? Is your own personal experience. And if that's helpful, right, to somebody else, great. But don't come in with, you're out there in the space and you see how relationships are lost. Trauma is inflicted upon some people that are just a little too aggressive in trying to cram their opinion down someone else's throat.
Yeah, we're not big believers in the cramming method of sharing
Yeah.
information. So I know you're not either. Thank you so much, Kathleen. This has been a great conversation. I hope an encouragement to people as they walked with loved ones. And also for people, I'm always thinking years into the future. There's people listening now who aren't currently walking with a loved one through addiction, but they will be at some point in their life. And what a gift if the cultural knowledge that we're gaining before we get to that point helps us in the very beginning to take a different approach. In the very beginning, to have a different kind of thinking about what's the goal and how can I best position myself to help my loved one, and how can I make sure that every day they know that they're loved. I thought of this when you were talking a minute ago. A mom told me recently, who's walked with her daughter through years of addiction, she said, I realized in her own learning journey that she wanted all of her, she wanted to step away from all of her communication with her child being just about the addiction, and realizing that's not healthy for me to just, that's the sole focus of everything I'm talking to them about is this one behavior. That's such a small view of who they are as a person. And so she would send her daughter funny little Instagram reels. And her daughter would never respond to them for long periods of time. And then, one day she responded back to one of them. And that stuck with me so much because I loved that thinking of your loved one may be in a crisis, but helping them see that there's a life outside of that crisis, that they are still they're more than the crisis, they're more than their addiction, they're more than the struggle they're currently in. And just finding those other ways to connect and to show love, and not just having it solely focused on, are you using today or not? That was just really touching to me and really beautiful and encouragement. And wow, that could so dramatically change the experience of people who are struggling really early on if we are better educated at the front end, so that we don't have to go 10 years before we kind of hit the wall and say, there's got to be something else out there. There's got to be a different way of approaching this. And instead, we can have some of those tools up front to better help the people that we love.
Amen. Amen. Yes.
Thanks so much, Kathleen. We appreciate you.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. Not a lot of people want to talk to me because my story is a little outrageous, so I appreciate you being so brave.
Well, look, any family who's doing anything right now feels like they are not extreme based on what Kathleen has done over the last 20 years. They're like, gosh, I thought I was really pushing the limits, but man, I'm conservative based on what Kathleen's doing. I love it. I love it that you're open. I love it that you've gotten your daughter's permission to talk about your own side of your journey. That's a really beautiful thing, too, to respect her privacy and desire for how she wants her story to be told, and your ability to tell your side of the story and be an advocate for that. So
yeah, we are featured in a documentary, so I'll keep you posted. I think it's going to be released early next year. They're trying to make this Sundance Film Festival, but that will be hopefully a way for both of us to not only do our own healing, but to help other parents as well. So stay tuned.
Yes, yeah. Keep us apprised of when it comes out.
I will.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And thank you for joining the End It For Good podcast and for listening today. You can find out more about our work at enditforgood.com. Sign up for our newsletter. And we hope that this content and all the content that we produce helps you on a journey towards life and health, and helping other people on that journey too. So how do we shift our drug policies from a criminal justice approach to a public health approach? By inviting one person at a time to change their mind. Changed minds are the catalyst to changed laws. But many people are only willing to have this conversation when they're invited to by someone that they trust. That's you. Invite your friends, coworkers, other people in your circle of influence to consider a better way. At End It for Good, our hope is that people who hear will become people who tell. Start a conversation and join the movement to end it for good.